In the 5th year of our engagement, Meng Xijuan still refused to marry me. The first time he rejected me, he said the king was relying on him. How could he indulge in love? That made sense. I nodded and waited 2 more years. The second time he rejected me, he said the queen had not yet been decided. How could a subject marry first? I got angry, feeling that this king was unreasonable. I've waited until I'm an old maid, and he still won't allow Meng Xijuan to marry me. I had a fight with Meng Xijuan and left home in a fit of pique, only to rescue a court official attempting suicide by the water. One of the respectable young women chosen for the draft ran away, and the royal attendant was so worried he was about to jump into the water. Can you see the king if you enter the palace? The palace servant saw my undone hair and unrouged face and nodded with delight. Of course, if you are favored, you will see the king every night. All right, I nodded. Hiked up my skirt and boarded the carriage with painted walls. When I see that king, I will have to ask him why he wouldn't allow Meng Xijuan to marry me. Miss, now that you're gone, how am I supposed to explain this to young Master Meng? Xiao Dao said anxiously. I thought for a moment, then lifted the curtain and waved. Just tell Meng Xijuan that AWU is still angry with him and won't be home for dinner tonight. The curtain fell, and Officer Wang looked me up and down, exclaiming in admiration. My dear, your face is the picture of nobility. I waved my hand dismissively. I was long tired of such pleasantries. Back when I was hunting rabbits in the mountains, I saved Meng Xijuan's life, and I heard his fortune-telling grandmother say, "This girl is extremely precious, an extremely precious face." I originally wanted to exchange Meng Xijuan's life-saving grace for a jar of fine salt, or a roll of good brocade, just because of this one sentence. Well, the fine salt was gone. And the good brocade was gone too. Meng's grandmother arranged a marriage between me and Meng Xijuan, saying that after she had been taught etiquette, they would choose a good day for Meng Xijuan to marry me. I thought about it, and it was okay. Getting married was okay too, after all. No one in Day's village would take a fancy to a wild girl like me, and when my father was seriously ill, he said that his biggest regret was not seeing me get married. But Meng Xijuan was always busy and didn't have time to marry me. The first year our marriage was arranged, he said the king had suddenly begun to rely heavily on him. How could he indulge in love? That made sense. I nodded, and waited 2 years. The 3rd year, he said the queen was yet to be decided. How could a subject marry first? I got angry, feeling that the king he was loyal to was so unreasonable. I've waited so long to become an old maid. Why wouldn't he allow Meng Xijuan to marry me? Even this morning, on my birthday, Meng Xijuan still had to go to the palace to choose a dress for the queen's coronation ceremony for the queen. I want to make a scene with Meng Xijuan. With my hands on my hips, I cursed all of the king's ancestors. Kumengzi, with his indifferent nature, merely glanced at me with weariness before leaving, tossing back a sentence as he went. This time, is it hanging, drowning, or running away from home? Don't play tricks, no matter how much you fuss. Be back before dinner to eat with grandmother, and I won't hold it against you. Thinking of this, I felt wronged, and my eyes reddened as I lowered my head. Yo, what's wrong? Did I touch a nerve with the young lady? Officer Wang quickly handed me a handkerchief. I was embarrassed for him to see, so I turned my head to look at the tassels on the curtain and said sullenly, AWU isn't sad. AWU has nothing to be sad about. Pa, Meng Xijuan, this time it's different. I won't be as pathetic as before, crying alone until dark, and then sneaking back to the Meng family because I'm just too hungry. I'm going to complain about you to the king, the person you care about the most. Now that you're entering the palace today, miss, I will write a letter to your family tomorrow to reassure them. No, Xiao Dao will tell him. But won't your family be worried about you leaving home, miss? I shook my head. Meng Xijuan wouldn't be worried, last time. I stormed out of the house for a day, only to return in the evening, hungry and feeling pathetic. I wanted him to coax me a little, so I said, Meng Xijuan, Awu ran away from home today. Meng Xijuan was reading, and didn't even bother to look up. Is that so? If you ran away from home, why did you come back? Why did I come back again? Because Day's township was too far from here, and Awu had nothing to eat. She walked for a long time on an empty stomach and couldn't find her way home. So, if I leave home this time, he won't worry, then there's no need to tell him, lest he think I'm trying to coerce him. After I file the complaint with the king, I'll return with Meng Xijuan after he attends court. But what kind of person is the king? Will he be partial to Meng Xijuan? The royal attendant looked at me with a smile. His Majesty is extremely benevolent and filial, and he is very compassionate towards the servants below. I don't believe that for a second. If that were the case, why wouldn't he allow Meng Xijuan to marry, and why would you try to drown yourself? The royal attendant looked guilty and didn't dare to look at me. I guessed it. The king is a very hypocritical and face-saving person. Would a king like that speak up for me? Then Uncle Wang, what kind of people does the king like? I want to please that king so that he will be biased towards me. Guessing what I was thinking, royal attendant Wang smiled knowingly. No one knows what kind of girl His Majesty likes. Over the years, the Empress Dowager has put a lot of effort into this for His Majesty. Daughters of commoners, daughters of dukes and marquises, noble ladies from the Empress Dowager's clan. His Majesty likes all of these. The royal attendant shook his head with a profound look. The king doesn't like any of these. I chewed on the reed stalk, staring absent-mindedly at the wild geese in the sky, feeling somewhat uncertain. The blue-green horse had had its fill of water, snorted, and nuzzled my face. Even if she wasn't confident, Ah Wu had to try. Just like her father had said when teaching Ah Wu to weave fishing nets, everything in this world can be learned. Don't say Ah Wu can't, say Ah Wu is willing to learn. Once, Meng Xijuan disliked my unseemly behavior and lack of etiquette, saying I couldn't even wear my robe properly. But Ah Wu was willing to learn, and she learned quickly. Later, even grandmother praised me for my good manners and the beautiful way I wore my robe. If your Majesty doesn't like Ah Wu, then Ah Wu will learn to make your Majesty like her. The wind rustled the reeds by the water's edge. I cheered up quickly again. The wind stirred the shadows of the trees, and the way the king's servant looked at me was full of affection and appreciation. This servant is not skilled in divination or observing auras, and face reading is also mostly inaccurate, but this servant believes the king will definitely like Miss Wu too. Miss Wu got into someone else's carriage. This servant couldn't stop her. Xiao Dao looked at Meng Xijuan uneasily. Stop her? Why stop her? Let her go. Meng Xijuan rubbed her brow with annoyance. Go do your thing. If grandma asks, just say she's not feeling well and went to bed early. AWU has been with the Meng family for 5 years and has run away from home twice. This time she's learned to be clever, bribing little Dao and even getting on someone else's carriage. She made up a plausible story, which counts as progress. The lamp flame popped twice, causing Meng Xijuan to wonder if some good fortune was on its way. The first piece of good fortune was naturally that Wen Niang, whom she had loved since she was young, had escaped the imperial draft yesterday for her sake. This morning, she lied that she was helping the king select formal attire, but in reality, she was busy all day arranging a place for Wen Niang. Wen Niang is naturally different from Ah Wu. Wen Niang was born of noble standing. We cannot slight her. The villa was hastily renovated once over. The maid serving her must be dutiful and attentive. Her robes, bedding, everything must be of the finest quality and most exquisite make. When Niang sat on the edge of the bed, looking at me with tearful eyes, hesitating to speak several times, Brother Ci-Jun, does our affection from back then still count? When Niang doesn't want to enter the palace as an imperial concubine, but Brother Ci-Jun already has a fiancé. When Niang is really uneasy, how could Ah Wu compare to her? For the past 5 years, she had been making excuses to delay their marriage, hoping that she would be sensible enough to pack her things and go back to Dezexiang on her own. If AWU really left this time, it would be 2 good things happening at once. But AWU was not sensible. She had also left home in a fit of pique a year ago, but she couldn't even pretend to be serious about it, didn't bring clothes, didn't take money, not even a travel permit, just deliberately putting on a show for herself. Only grandmother took it seriously, so heartbroken she couldn't sleep, so anxious she wanted to go out with the servants to look for her. As expected, there was no need to search. She couldn't keep up the act and came back on her own, not sure where she'd been playing, but her shoes, socks, and dress were all wet and covered in mud. I was reading and really couldn't be bothered to look up at her, Wu said, aggrieved. Meng Xijuan, Wu ran away from home today, so she never cared about her own affairs. Like before when traveling, she excitedly pointed at a tree, saying that only whistles made from those leaves could be understood by the geese, seeing her rustic appearance. The young masters and ladies around her winked and giggled, causing me to lose all face. Later, grandmother asked Wu why she was in such a disheveled state. She said, Wu didn't mean to get her dress dirty. Wu didn't know the river in the capital was so long. She walked so far on an empty stomach and still couldn't find her way home. Don't blame the river chief, blame her for being a fool, not walking on the main road, but along the riverbank. But she went hungry last time she ran away from home. She should have learned her lesson this time. She'll always be back before dinner, leave a bowl for her. As dusk gradually deepened, U's bowl of rice turned cold, but she still hadn't returned. The maid, lacking perception, moved to clear the rice away. Put it away and heat it up later tonight. That way, this troublemaker of hers won't come back in the middle of the night, disturb grandmother, and make people start a fire to cook. For some reason, Meng Xijuan was always absent-minded. He, who usually skims through pages, why has he spent half the day on the book in his hands, yet still hasn't turned a page? There were 2 soft knocks on the door. Meng Xijuan felt a joy that even she hadn't noticed, but feigned anger and said, "What time is it? Do you even know to come back?" "Young master, it's just me." It wasn't Wu, it was the servant Songyang. The cook came to ask if the young master is hungry, and whether to heat up the meal. It's not hot anymore. I might as well let her eat a bowl of cold rice and freeze to death. Put the rice in the small stove outside the study. When the stove was delivered, it was drizzling outside. The wind picked up, causing the lamplight on the wall to flicker slightly. He wondered if the king would worry about the autumn floods during the court session tomorrow. He knew he should be thinking about how to answer if the king asked about the autumn floods. But for some reason, Meng Xijuan couldn't help but let his mind wander. That little troublemaker is back, and her dress and shoes are probably wet again. As the lamp flickered and was about to go out, Meng Xijuan finally finished writing tomorrow's memorial. As the last word was written, the door was pushed open, blowing in half a room of moisture. Just as he had expected, she couldn't keep up the pretense and came back in the rain, soaked to the bone. Wu stood outside the door, hitched up her skirt, and bared her feet, revealing a section of her calf. Just like the first time I saw her, she tore off a piece of her skirt without hesitation to bandage herself, revealing a section of her calf, making me unsure where to look. The AW before him was utterly innocent, unaware of the barriers between men and women. Like a lamb with dewy eyes, like the mountain spirit's youngest daughter, she nimbly jumped into his arms, hooking her neck and tilting her head to look at him. Even her spoiled voice was misty. "Meng Xijuan, Wu has run away from home." As if possessed, I actually reached out and held her in my arms. The completed memorials on the table were blown onto the ground by the wind. His usually prized calligraphy was also soaked by the moisture, turning into blobs of ink. It was no longer possible to tell what was written. "This autumn rain is truly lingering and annoying, as if it won't rest until it has drenched him completely." Meng Xijuan woke up with a start. The room was silent, the candlelight flickering. The memorials were neatly arranged, the handwriting upright, not smudged, not finished writing, just like Wu, never to return. 3. Does Miss Wu have a request for the king? Yes, I suddenly became cautious. "Uncle Wang, do you know Meng Xijuan?" "Of course I know. Lord Meng is the king's close attendant, and the king favors him greatly. If there's something important, he will surely be summoned to the palace." The Wang attendant said with a smile, "Is there something the matter?" "Nothing, Miss Wu. Whether you want to seek a title for your family or have a grievance to air, be sure to wait until the king is fond of you before mentioning it." The Wang attendant looked around and whispered, "And be sure not to let the Empress Dowager know. She is most opposed to this." I quickly nodded. "I'll wait until the king likes me before I complain. I'll have him grant a marriage between Meng Xijuan and me." Aunt Ju from Caisang Palace helped me change my clothes, apply makeup, and tie a small jade ornament around my waist. This jade must not be damaged, and even more so, not lost. Aunt Ju earnestly instructed me, if you lose it, you won't be able to see the king. When I ran out of the room after getting dressed up, I saw more than a dozen girls dressed exactly like me. After thinking about it, I immediately understood the reasoning behind it. When Meng Xijuan left the court, there were quite a few people wearing the same clothes as him. I looked outside the Picking Mulberry Palace and saw Meng Xijuan's figure. Oh no, he must be here to catch me. I was anxious and happened to run into Attendant Wang. I quickly grabbed him and pointed at Meng Xijuan, Uncle Wang. I need to see the king, I have something very important. Attendant Wang looked a little embarrassed, but he saw that I was so anxious that tears were about to fall. Don't cry, child, the king is meeting with Lord Meng to choose the pattern for the queen's wedding gown. Yes, so I have to hurry over there. Officer Wang suddenly understood something and asked me meaningfully, trespassing in the king's bedroom is a capital offense. Is Miss AW willing to take the gamble? I nodded vigorously. Of course, I'll bet I can run fast enough to file the complaint before Meng Xijuan. Forget it, my life was given by you, Miss. Royal Attendant Wang finally sighed and pointed out a small path for me. Go through that hibiscus grove, and you'll find the royal bath, which is connected to the royal palace. Ahead lies either a dead end or fortune, it all depends on the young lady's destiny. I ran past the hibiscus bushes, past the misty hot springs. I saw, within the golden and magnificent palace, behind the swaying gauze curtains, a man sitting in a dark robe. Your Majesty. The king was about to turn around when a palace servant knelt and announced that Lord Meng was requesting an audience. I was so anxious that I didn't know what to do, but then I saw a very large chest. I quickly hid inside the chest, quietly listening to the sounds outside. The king glanced back at the chest, as if suspecting he had misheard something earlier, and turned his head to say, "Summon." Meng Xijuan knelt respectfully below the steps and saluted. I rarely see you looking so weary. Xijuan, is there something on your mind? Your subject is getting married. Only yesterday, while preparing the purchases, did I realize that marriage is such a complicated affair. My heart leaped with joy. Meng Xijuan is going to marry me. I was so happy I wanted to jump out of the chest and drag Meng Xijuan home, but Meng Xijuan spoke again. There is also a matter that worries me deeply. My younger sister is missing. Does Meng Xijuan have a younger sister? How come I don't know about this? Yesterday, my younger sister and a maid went out for a stroll. That maid was foolish and didn't know how to protect her mistress. My younger sister is simple-minded and was abducted by a kidnapper. We still don't know her whereabouts. Could the sister he's talking about be me? Who is he going to marry? I couldn't bother thinking about that at the moment. The trunks were full of clothes, and the heat made my face powder run. But it doesn't matter, I've already ordered the servants to investigate. The important thing now is the queen's dress. I noticed Meng Xijuan's gaze fall on the trunk where I was hiding. Meng Xijuan walked towards my hiding place step by step, and I started sweating anxiously. But before his hand landed, the king's voice laughed from behind. No need to look. I have no favorite pattern, choosing anyone is the same. Meng Xijuan withdrew his hand. I breathed a sigh of relief. Nothing to report today. I'll take my leave. The king thought for a moment, then added, since C.I. Jun is preoccupied with various matters, I grant you 3 days of leave. Meng C.I. Jun thanked the king repeatedly and withdrew. The king really favored Meng C.I. Jun, and granted him leave upon hearing that he had matters to attend to. Come out, I hid in the chest. Looking left and right, the silent and empty bedchamber held only the king. Is he talking to me? I dare not go out. Suddenly the gauze curtain was lifted, and the chest was opened. The person before me was dressed in a black robe, his eyebrows and eyes gentle and smiling. Was it hot in the chest? I didn't mean to. I scrambled out of the chest, trying to imitate Meng Xijuan's curtsy, but I fell to the ground because my legs were numb. The jade pendant that Aunt Ju had told me to keep on my waist slipped off and broke in two. Seeing the jade broken, I was so anxious that tears fell. I wiped my tears with my sleeve, and even the newly changed clothes got dirty. It's over. Awu is done for. AW's marriage is over too. Awu will never see the king again, and the king will never like Awu again. Did I scare you? The king picked up the broken half of the jade pendant and handed it to me. I shook my head. dejectedly sitting on the ground, sullen. "You didn't scare me," Aunt Ju said. "If the jade is broken, I can't see you. My clothes are dirty too. Awu doesn't have any new clothes to wear." Seeing the clothes I was wearing and the broken jade pendant, the king pondered for a moment. "So, as long as you have a new jade pendant to wear and new clothes, Awu won't cry anymore." The king smiled warmly, taking a phoenix-patterned jade pendant from his waist and placing it in my hand. Then pointing to the chest, "There are clothes there, Awu. Pick one you like to wear." After I changed my clothes, Officer Wang, hearing the summons, hurried into the hall. Seeing the phoenix ornament on my waist and the clothes I was wearing, Officer Wang trembled and knelt on the ground. "Your Majesty, forgive my impudence. But isn't this too hasty? What about the Empress Dowager?" The king waved his hand dismissively, pointed to my tear-stained face, and smiled. "Wang Bao. Look at the way she's crying. What does she look like?" The imperial attendant Wang warily raised his head to glance at me, and he also chuckled, like a little tabby cat. That night, I didn't go to stay in the Cai Sang Palace. The king didn't lie to me. He said that as long as I didn't cry, I could see him every day from now on. The maids bathed and perfumed me. Aunt Ju smiled happily, loosely tying my hair with a silk ribbon. The silk ribbon was cool and smooth. And brushing against my neck always made me laugh. Looking left and right, Aunt Ju felt something was still missing and loosened my collar. "Lower this collar, lower still. The king will surely like it." The palace hall was ablaze with candlelight, illuminating the king's handsome and gentle features. "Wang Bao tells me that AWU is from Days Township." The king smiled slightly. "Days Township is a very good place. Once, I was bitten by a venomous snake and thought I wouldn't survive, but a hunter from Days Township brought herbs, and I recovered. Does your Majesty also know about Days Village?" I forgot about complaining and immediately sat up straight. "There are many poisonous snakes in Days Village, but AWU's father is very good at catching snakes, and Awu is not afraid of snakes either. If your Majesty is bitten by a snake again, don't be afraid. Awu knows the medicine to cure snake venom and will bring it to your Majesty." The king listened patiently to me, a smile playing on his lips. "Once, I wanted to tell Meng Xijuan the story of Dezexiang, to tell him that the miasma in the mountains of Dezexiang was purple, and that there were mountain spirits riding red leopards, to tell him that even the wild geese in the sky were willing to fly down to listen to the leaf whistle that father taught me to play. Once upon a time, I got lost in the mountains, and my father taught me that as long as I kept walking along the water, I could find my way home at the foot of the mountain. But Meng Xijuan would never listen to these words. He would only coldly say, 'Since Dezexiang is so good, why are you staying here and not going back?' But the king would not. When I mentioned the whistle that could make even wild geese fly down to listen, the king said he would very much like to hear it too. After saying so much, "Is Awu tired?" If the king enjoys listening, Awu can talk all night long. The king paused, tilted his head slightly, and smiled indulgently. Then I could listen to Awu talk all night. The palace servants attending them, however, grew sleepy and added a handful of incense to the burner. The incense burned, making my whole body feel hot, and I pulled off the silk ribbon that bound my hair. The king's gaze fell on my face, then slid down to my slightly open collar, as the incense burned stronger. The king's gentle, watery eyes deepened bit by bit, like a deadly abyss beneath a still pool, like a leopard hiding behind hibiscus flowers ready to bite its prey's throat. "Awu," the king called me in a deep voice. Reaching out his hand, I moved closer to the king, looked up at him, wanting to ask for a reward for myself. "AWU has kept you company for so long. Does the king like AWU even a little?" Hearing me ask this, the king's deep eyes paused slightly, and his hand landed on my head. The king stroked my head and smiled. "Yes." I was happy and quickly said, "Then Awu wants to sleep. Your Highness should go back to sleep too. If your Highness wants to listen, Awu will tell you a story again tomorrow." The palace servants looked at me with complicated expressions, as if they wanted to say something. The king smiled, not taking it to heart. "I like Awu just as she is. No one is allowed to restrain her." The palace servants responded with a chorus of agreements. Watching the king's carriage disappear into the distance, the royal attendant sighed. "My little ancestor, You risked your life to gain the king's favor. Why are you unwilling to keep him here now? What if the king gets angry and refuses to come again? No. The king said he would come again tomorrow to listen to AW tell stories. Aunt Ju secretly kicked the royal attendant. What do you know? I think the king likes her very much. I'm just afraid the Empress Dowager might not like Miss AW. 4. I want to see what kind of enchantress you've chosen for the king, that she bewitched him at first sight. And he even gave her the phoenix pendant. Wang Bao knelt below the steps, cold sweat soaking his back. Behind the beaded curtain, the Queen Mother glanced sideways at Wang Bao and sneered. She must have been raised by a prestigious family. In the future, she might become a source of trouble from powerful relatives through the maternal line. Tell me, is she from the Ji clan or the Wei clan? She is a daughter found and raised by a hunter from Day's village. When she was chosen to enter the palace, she was all alone. Since entering the palace, not even her parents or relatives have inquired about her. Wang Bao felt that the Empress Dowager's silence at this moment held a hint of awkwardness. She must be full of seductive wiles. I must see for myself. Where is she? At Saisong Palace, when the Empress Dowager's carriage arrived. The women of good families in Saisong Palace were packing their luggage, ready to return to their villages. I was also packing my own clothes. The king said that from now on, I would be residing in Zhenjia Palace for a long time. Raise your heads. Let me see who it is. The crowd knelt, raising their faces. The Queen Mother sneered. Is this the one? There's a touch of flirtatiousness in her eyes. She doesn't look like someone who'll settle down. Wang Bao wiped his sweat. Reporting to the Empress Dowager, it's not her. No one dared to laugh at the Empress Dowager Wang. Empress Dowager Wang coughed lightly, feeling awkward, and scanned the room again. Finally, her gaze landed on my face, and she pointed at me. This one looks sensible and is a little more pleasing to the eye. Keep this one too. How can the king's harem have only one? Wang Bao felt his days were numbered. He knelt on the ground, trembling, and said, reporting to the Empress Dowager. The one the king chose is her. In the Empress Dowager's palace, it was so quiet that even the crackling of the incense wood burning in the censer could be heard. I don't want to talk to you. Get out of here. I glanced at the tea and snacks on the table and said softly, the Empress Dowager wants to talk to A Wu. What are you saying? The Queen Mother glanced at me with disgust. Get out of here. I have nothing to say to you. Then A Wu wants to talk to the Queen Mother. A Wu spoke a lot with the king yesterday, all about Dezexiang. A Wu can also tell the Queen Mother. Tell me, just as the king hurried over after court, he heard me talking about the mountain spirit goddess riding a red leopard. My father said that the mountain spirit girl was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. But A Wu went up the mountain several times afterwards and got lost many times. But she never saw the mountain spirit girl that her father mentioned. The Empress Dowager was dazed as she listened. What do you call yourself, A Wu? This name was also given by my father. He said that when he found A Wu was always crying. Later, my father imitated a leopard, roaring A Wu, and A Wu laughed. So he named her A Wu. And what about your father? My father died of illness 7 years ago. I was about to shed tears again as I spoke of the sorrowful part. Behind the beaded curtain, the Empress Dowager was silent for a long while. Not speaking, it was the king who rushed in and, seeing me sitting safe and sound, eating tea and snacks, breathed a sigh of relief. A Wu is straightforward by nature. I hope the Empress Dowager will not blame her. I wouldn't eat her. The Empress Dowager rubbed her temples wearily and waved her hand. I'm tired after listening for half a day. You may leave. When the king and I returned to Zhenjia Palace, the stars in the sky were sparse. The evening breeze carried the chill of autumn, blowing on my face and bringing a touch of melancholy to my heart. How did AW know that Empress wanted to chat with you? Empress Dowager had 2 servings of pastries on the table and even brewed tea. AW could smell it. It's so fragrant. I blinked my eyes cleverly. Before, when annoying guests came to our house, father wouldn't even boil water, let alone tea. The king suddenly smiled, as if relieved. You spend more time talking with the Empress. She also enjoys hearing you talk about the Dezexiang region. Why? Because your mother also tamed leopards when she was young. The king smiled. It was a red leopard, and it only listened to her. except for the hunter from Dezexiang who tamed it. So that's how powerful the Empress Dowager is. Yes, the Empress Dowager is a very formidable person. What about the red leopard that the Empress Dowager tamed, and the hunter? The king suddenly smiled with a hint of melancholy. Later, that leopard was kept by my father in the deer park. It lost its freedom, starved itself to death, and never returned to the Great Swamp. 5. It had been half a month since Awu disappeared, and Meng Xijuan still had no leads. The grandmother was so worried that she fell ill, crying and begging Meng Xijuan to find her. You know Awu is simple-minded and doesn't understand anything. If she's tricked into a brothel, or sold into slavery, how will she survive? She hasn't left the city, and no one has seen her. Awu seemed to have vanished into thin air. Meng Xijuan was anxious. He had inquired at brothels and gambling dens, but there was still no news. He hadn't had a good night's sleep in over 10 days. He kept dreaming of Awu standing by the water's edge with a wet skirt, her eyes red as she said she wanted to return to the Great Swamp. It was just dreaming of the naive Awu being teased frivolously, and she still smiled at that person with a blank look. He had also guessed the worst-case scenario. The autumn floodwaters were swift, and Awu drowned. That maid, Xiao Dao, was always lazy and had sticky fingers. When she was assigned to serve Awu, she would seize any opportunity to be lazy and bully her master. Only Awu was easy to talk to, and she was often bullied or stolen from by Xiao Dao, but she didn't know how to argue with her. So in the end, was she abducted, or did she fall into the water and drown while playing by the water? Xiao Dao's words cannot be entirely trusted. The most heartbreaking time for him was when an informant said that a brothel had a virgin prostitute who bore some resemblance to Awu's portrait. Meng Xijuan had just bathed, her hair was not yet dry, and she grabbed her sword and hurried away. The horses neighed, and the night dew soaked through my clothes. The wind whistled past my ears, and Meng Xijuan kept thinking, if it were Awu, what would he do? She is your wife. Naturally you should marry her. Meng Xijuan was startled by his own thought, but once he calmed down, he couldn't help but curl the corners of his lips. Marry her. Yes, marry her. Awu was his fiancée to begin with. As this thought arose, the moon broke through the clouds, illuminating his heart with sudden clarity. In these days, Awu was away from him, and he belatedly realized how lost he was. Actually, from the first time he met Awu and was rescued by her from the mountains, his heart was moved at first sight. It's just that he was too arrogant, always feeling that Awu, who grew up in the mountains, was not worthy of him. What about Wen Niang? Naturally, he must plead guilty to the king and send her back home. In this draft, the king only kept a good family woman of commoner origin, and the usually stern Empress Dowager did not say a word. They say in the palace that the king spoils the queen, even taking her on the autumn hunt. Everyone thought it would cause discord between the king and the queen mother, but no one expected the queen to be so well liked by the queen mother. The king and the queen mother are very satisfied with the queen, so they probably won't pursue Wen Niang's escape. Sending her home safely can be considered the fulfillment of their childhood neighborly affection. In the brothel at night, the sounds of revelry fill the air. Behind the gauze curtain were the sounds of a woman crying and screaming, making Meng Xijuan's heart ache. With a single sword, he severed the lock and split open the hanging gauze curtain. He took off his cloak and wrapped Awu tightly in his arms. Don't be afraid, Awu, I'm taking you home. It's just a nightmare. Don't cry. Meng Xijuan had a penchant for cleanliness. He thought he would hesitate, shrink back, and feel disgusted, but when he held Awu tightly in his arms, all cowardly thoughts disappeared, only heartache and self-blame remain. He is the one who caused Awu to fall into this situation. If he hadn't kept dragging her along, again and again, if he had married her without hesitation in the first place, she wouldn't have left in a fit of pique. And she wouldn't have suffered these tortures. We'll get married when we return, and we'll go back to days to pay respects to father. Meng Xijuan will never let Awu be sad again. Meng Xijuan's eyes reddened, but she saw the person in her arms poke her head out. What is Gongzi saying? She was so concerned that she was confused. This prostitute was not Awu at all. The moon shone silently on the road on the way back. The sound of the wild geese was cold, making one's heart ache. If Awu were here, She would definitely point happily at the sky, saying that she could whistle in a way that would make the geese turn back. I shouldn't have interrupted her back then. I should have listened to her. Meng Xijuan collapsed on the couch. Song Yang said that there was an imperial decree from the palace just now. Tomorrow is the autumn hunt, and the king wants master to go along. He rubbed his brow, not in the mood for the autumn hunt, but still had to pull himself together to accompany the king. The next day, Meng Xijuan woke up late and hurried to the hunting grounds. He heard the king, surrounded by guards, and the back of the queen. Meng Xijuan knelt on the ground, pleading guilty. That day, it wasn't my younger sister, but my wife who went missing. I truly regret not paying enough attention to her. And now my grandmother is also sick with worry. I searched for her yesterday and didn't sleep all night, which is why I was late. The king was focused on listening to the queen and didn't notice Meng Xijuan. Seeing the flock of geese in the sky, the queen folded a leaf into a whistle, wanting to blow it for the king to hear. Suddenly, she thought for a moment, put the whistle to her lips, then lowered it. I won't blow it. It will delay their trip south for the winter. When they return in the spring, Obu will play it for the king again. Meng Xijuan was struck as if by lightning, and suddenly looked up at the queen. That back and voice were exactly like Obu. The king looked at her adoringly, listening to her incessant chatter. The queen pointed to the river and said, "When I used to get lost in the mountains, my father taught Awu to follow the streams and rivers downhill, and she would find her way home. So whenever Awu is sad and misses home, she walks along the river." The king smiled tenderly and took her hand. "The autumn floodwaters are fierce, Awu. Don't walk along the riverbank. If Awu misses home, I will accompany Awu back. Awu is a good swimmer and has even saved people." The usually gentle and generous king thought for a moment, then smiled mischievously. "Then Awu's father didn't tell you that there are man-eating giant toads in the river in autumn?" Man-eating toads, yes. In the autumn rivers of the royal capital, there are toads as tall as half a person, and they love to scoop out hearts to eat. The queen seemed to believe it, and carefully shrunk closer to the king. The king turned his head, looked at Meng Xijuan, and smiled. "Meng Xijuan, what were you saying about your wife just now?" As he spoke, the queen turned her head, revealing the face she had been longing for day and night. He stared blankly at Awu. "My wife." Awu was by the king's side. Waving at him happily, Meng Xijuan, "You've come at just the right time, Your Majesty. Awu would like to ask you to grant Awu and Meng Xijuan a marriage." 6. As soon as she finished speaking, both Meng Xijuan and the king were stunned. For some reason, Meng Xijuan's face turned ghastly, and the king even abandoned the autumn hunt. Inside the king's palace, I looked nervously at the silent king, then at Meng Xijuan kneeling on the ground. Did Awu say something wrong? Awu didn't say anything wrong. "Don't be afraid." The king's eyes were still gentle, the phoenix pendant lying quietly in his palm. "Does Awu understand what this phoenix pendant means?" I nodded. "I understand, because my jade pendant broke, so you gave me a good one, right?" The king was stunned for a long time, still smiling, but with a touch of inexplicable loneliness. "Awu is right. That's what I meant. I don't know why, but seeing the king so lonely, my heart aches and feels so sad. It's like having my neck tangled by thorny vines, and then being pecked in the eyes by wild geese twice." So Awu entered the palace to complain to me, to ask Meng Xijuan to marry you. Looking into the king's eyes, I don't know why, Awu wanted to lie, to say it wasn't true, to stop the king's eyes from looking so forlorn. But father said you can't lie, you can't be a disloyal person, and you must do what you promised. 5 years ago, I promised grandmother, and also promised Meng Xijuan, that I would marry him. You must do what you promised. You can't go back on your word. Yes. Seeing my unease, the king wanted to reach out and touch my head, but seemingly thought it inappropriate and withdrew his hand. I understand. The king placed the phoenix pendant and the leaf whistle he had made during the autumn hunt into my hand. Awu's heart is like a wild goose in the sky, free to fly wherever it pleases. Both the king and Ajing hope for Awu's freedom and happiness. The king told me a few days ago, privately, that I don't need to address him as the king, but can simply call him Ajing. That phoenix pendant had been in his hand for a long time, warm to the touch. I stared blankly at the king, and I don't know why, but my eyes turned red. I wanted to reach out with my sleeve to wipe my eyes, but suddenly I realized that the king would no longer give me new clothes to wear. These were clothes given to me by the king, and I must cherish them and not use them to wipe away tears. The king handed me a handkerchief instead, coaxing me gently, "You, don't cry, you didn't do anything wrong." The king recalled an old matter and pardoned Meng Xijuan's crime. "I used to keep a kitten, but the Empress Dowager didn't like it. She said that a ruler should not indulge in playthings, so I hid it in my bedroom and secretly raised it. But later, when the Empress Dowager came to check my lessons, I hid it in a chest." The Empress Dowager seemed to have discovered it and deliberately stayed for a very long time. By the time she left, the kitten had suffocated to death. I understood it back then that neither kittens, leopards, nor imperial concubines were suitable to be kept in the palace or by the king's side. When Meng Xijuan and I left the palace, the sky was dim, and it was snowing lightly. The wind, carrying snowflakes, blew into the carriage. Meng Xijuan, afraid I would get cold, wanted to lower the curtain. I stubbornly refused, gazing longingly at the palace walls growing more and more distant behind me. Meng Xijuan held my hand tightly, as if a treasured possession had been recovered. He said that we would get married as soon as we returned. The wedding dress would be made of the finest satin, the pastries would be filled with plenty of honey and sugar, and the banquet wine would be the most fragrant and aged brew. I couldn't hear a single word he said. I thought sullenly, now that I'm leaving, who will tell Jing stories tonight? The wedding date was approaching, and I watched as the Meng family gradually decorated, full of joy. Grandmother's health also improved, but I fell ill. After leaving the palace, I had a fever for days and couldn't eat anything. 7 or 8 doctors said it wasn't an illness, and I would get better as long as I was willing to eat. Meng Xijuan tried every means to buy me delicious food, peach blossom pastry, almond milk. These are all my favorite things. Meng Xijuan sat by the bed, patiently feeding me bit by bit, no matter what it was. As soon as I smelled it, I felt nauseous and vomited violently over the edge of the bed. In the few days that I have been ill, the embroiderer has measured the dress 3 times, and the size has been changed again and again, always getting smaller. The doctor said it wasn't pregnancy, nor consumption. They couldn't explain it, but I understood. Perhaps the wind and snow from the day I left the palace blew into my heart. Because my body was so weak, I often couldn't tell if I was awake or dreaming. I clearly saw the spring bloom, and the returning southern geese flew overhead. When I held that dry leaf whistle and chased after the geese, I vaguely realized that I was thinly dressed, standing barefoot in the snow. The doctors from the palace said it was soul detachment and required human blood as medicine. There was not a single piece of good flesh left on Meng Xijuan's arm. He asked the doctor anxiously, "Can this illness be cured?" The Empress Dowager once suffered from the same wandering soul syndrome and recovered after taking medicine. The doctor paused his needling, then said that the king was now suffering from the same illness. But like a Wu, the king refused to take medicine. I feel like I've been trapped in a cocoon for too long, and I can barely hear what others are saying. But I heard that the king is also sick and refuses to take medicine. I stared blankly at the wind and snow outside the door, and tears streamed down my face without knowing why. In the weeping of the heavy snow, my illness relapsed. Ignoring the obstruction of the maids and Meng Xijuan, I stumbled and pushed the door open. They lied to me. It didn't snow at all. There's no wind or snow in sight. The weather is lovely, perfect for seeing Jing. A clear, bright moon in the sky illuminates a quiet, flowing river for me. My Jing, my king, is at the end of the river, smiling warmly at me. Meng Xijuan tried her best to hold me back, but was stopped by my grandmother. "You'll kill Wu if you don't let her go." Meng Xijuan stared blankly at my retreating figure. I had such a high fever that I actually saw Uncle Wang driving the carriage over. I staggered, clutching at Uncle Wang's clothes, sobbing breathlessly. "Uncle Wang, Wu misses the king so much. But Wu is a person who doesn't keep her word. The king must hate Wu now." Uncle Wang held me in his arms with heartache, patting my back incessantly, and even he choked with emotion. "Child, don't cry. You're breaking my heart with your tears. Wu is delirious from her illness. the king has never disliked Lady AW. 7. AW is probably dying, because AW saw the king. When father passed away from illness, I cried constantly. Father said he saw the mountain spirit goddess bringing a red leopard to receive him, and he was going to live the good life he never had before. Then AW must be dying soon. To have seen the king she could only see in her dreams. But why is the king in her dreams also sick? The king held my hand, and we slept on the same bed, even though the king was unconscious. His hand was thin, warm, and dry, but it made me sleep soundly. When I woke up the next day, I was even able to eat medicine and food. Even better, the doctor said that the king's pulse was also stable. On the third day, the Empress Dowager summoned me. She wore a cold expression and sighed. I have truly indulged you and the king too much. Then, seeing my gaunt face, the Empress Dowager ultimately didn't say anything harsher. She sighed, "Oh, being a queen is very hard, do you understand?" I nodded vigorously. As long as I can stay by the king's side, AW is willing to learn. The Empress Dowager looked at me sternly. The queen should act with propriety and decorum, advising the king. For the rest of her life, she will be confined within the palace walls, unable to act freely on her own. I do not wish to see a king who enjoys the offerings of the people yet abandons them, nor a queen who lives in luxury yet constantly speaks of freedom in the countryside. I believe you can learn. But in the future, when the king has 3,000 beauties in his harem, will you not harbor resentment? Must you learn about each one as well? I understood these things when I was delirious with illness. AW can't explain many principles. AW only knows that when she used to follow her father hunting in the mountains, she envied the farmers at the foot of the mountains. They didn't have to gamble on a day's luck, hoping that rabbits and wild boars would be fooled. Because the land wouldn't deceive them, as long as they planted seeds, crops would grow, and farmers wouldn't starve like hunters if they had bad luck. Later, the farmers at the foot of the mountain told AW that they envied AW and her father. The prey grew up in the mountains on their own, and setting traps was so easy. The hunted furs could also keep them warm, and they didn't have to serve the crops like they served their ancestors, guarding against natural disasters and insect pests, guarding against cheap rice and heavy taxes, and not having warm clothes to get through the winter. AW understands in her heart that whether it is a farmer or a hunter, a commoner's wife or a queen in the palace, no one in this world can have it both ways. AW can see the king every day, eat fine rice and wear good clothes, which is already a great advantage. Being greedy again will be punished by God. As for the emperor's 3,000 concubines, AW has already thought it through. If winter comes, AW's heart is like a wild goose, free to fly wherever it wants. Mother, the emperor has 3,000 concubines. You think so badly of a Jing and so little of AW. I turned my head sharply. My king, my Jing was wearing only a thin layer of clothing. Weakly supported by the palace servants, he stood in the warm winter sunlight, not hiding the praise in his eyes, and smiled at me. Awu spoke very well. Jing heard everything. My tears betrayed me again. The king laughed at me. Awu, don't cry, or you'll turn into a little crybaby again. The Empress Dowager kept me for supper and ordered the king back to his palace to take his medicine. The Empress Dowager is truly a remarkable person. She even knows that I like eating peach blossom pastries and almond milk. Seeing me looking at her adoringly, the Empress Dowager curled her lips into a nonchalant sneer. It's fine if AW likes to eat these, but she mustn't like to eat fermented fish. Why can't she eat fermented fish, small fried fish fermented in wine? How fragrant. The kitten stole some fermented fish and got drunk as if it were dead. The Empress Dowager had drunk a bit too much, and her hand was unsteady as she picked up her wine cup, revealing a fresh wound under her sleeve that had not yet healed. She sighed with melancholy. Jing, you think of your mother in such a bad light too. 8. The Empress Dowager didn't make things difficult for you, did she? The Empress Dowager is a very, very good person. She helped AW think of so many things. Those rules the Empress Dowager mentioned, AW doesn't have to learn them if she doesn't want to. Candlelight flickered in the Genjia Palace, illuminating my king, his eyebrows and eyes so beautiful they made my heart tremble. The Empress Dowager wants AW to learn etiquette. AW is not sad. I lowered my head. suddenly realizing that I was stuttering as I spoke. But when she told Awu not to like the king, Awu was very sad. The palace maid, Tianxiang, lowered her head, unable to suppress her laughter. My king blushed, coughed lightly, and dismissed the attending palace servants. Inside the hall, it was just me and Jing again. I thought of what the doctor said, that the king refused to take his medicine. Since he's sick, why won't he take his medicine? What is Jing thinking? The king looked at me with a smile. When I'm very ill, I often dream of Wu. I dreamed of being bitten by a poisonous snake, and Miss Awu from Dezexiang came to see Jing with medicinal herbs. I dreamed that spring was in full bloom, and Awu plucked a leaf and made a whistle, blowing it for Jing to hear. The dream he spoke of was exactly the same as mine, to stay with Jing for the rest of my life, and be Jing's queen. Does Awu understand what I mean? Awu understands. It's not about receiving the phoenix pendant, nor is it about putting on the queen's robe. It's about Awu being willing to learn earnestly, and Jing being willing to teach earnestly. It's the kind of story Awu could tell for a lifetime without getting bored, and Jing could listen to for a lifetime without getting tired of it. Oh, speaking of Jing teaching earnestly and Awu learning diligently, I remembered that day the king returned to his palace after hearing the story. The next day, Aunt Ju gave me a booklet, saying that if I learned the things inside, the king would like Awu. The little people in the booklet were fighting in various ways. I didn't understand, so I pulled it out from under the bed and asked Jing, can you teach me? Jing blushed and tried to hold down my hand as I flipped through the booklet, clearing his throat softly. You don't understand these things, just let things take their course. Of course, I refused. Mimicking the first page, I flipped over and pinned Jing down, looking at him like a little leopard, proud and majestic. No, Awu wants to learn now. Awu is willing to learn. Awu is willing to learn everything.